Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Charlotte Kelshiker, and welcome to the Oxford MBA Application Tips webinar. Either good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. What I'd like to do, first of all, before we get things underway, is to do a quick sound check. So I'll say testing, testing, and you can let me know whether you can hear me by typing into the question box on your screen. So testing, testing. Can anyone hear me? If you can let me know that I'm coming through nice and loud, brilliant. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Abhishek. Excellent. Great. Let's get things underway then. So, as I say, welcome to our Oxford MBA Application Tips webinar. I will, for the next little while, be chatting you through a few handy hints around crafting your application. Some of you are probably in the process of frantically getting your last bits and pieces together, ready to submit your application in good time before our next application deadline falls, which is this Friday, 10th of January. This is going to be quite a focused session this afternoon. It is literally going to be about application tips. I'm not going to talk about the programme itself. We often run information events via webinar, so I'm not going to be talking about the academic content of the programme or college membership or anything like this. This is going to be a very focused session on submitting your application. Okay, so without further ado, you might think that I'm talking to you this afternoon from somewhere that looks like this. A great shot here of the Radcliffe camera, which is part of the Bodleian Library. There's also All Souls College there. And yes, as you probably know, if you study at Oxford, you do get to be a member at a college. And you might have visions that I'm talking to you this afternoon from one of these dreaming spires, but I'm not. I'm talking to you from here. This is Oxford Side, this is the business school, and this is where your academic life will unfold if you make a successful application to the Oxford MBA. So all of your classes, your lectures, maybe your tutorials, your project work, all of your competitions that you might enter are pretty much going to revolve around this building, a place that you will get to know very well. So really the contrast here, I guess, to show you in these two pictures is the ancient university. And that previous shot was I suppose, the medieval heart of Oxford University, and very much what springs to mind when you think of this institution. But as far as business education is concerned, Oxford is quite a young business school, and we have a building that is commensurate with that newness and that relative youth. So we have a nice modern campus right next door to the railway centre here in Oxford, and everything is on site, whether it's your academic teaching, whether it's access to the administrators for the programme, or indeed recruitment and admissions are based here also. But that's not what we're here to talk about this afternoon. It's not a guided tour of the business school. Let's get down to some brass tacks. So just to refresh your memories, you are applying to join the next MBA cohort that starts in September 2020. The current class looks like this. 329 students. You're probably very familiar with these stats from brochures and our web and what have you. But 329 students drawn from across the globe. We have 64 nationalities represented in the current class, which is an increase on last year's cohort. So it is a truly international experience. If your application is successful, you will find yourself learning alongside people from many different walks of life and drawn from all corners of the globe. You won't find a classroom full of British students. As you will see, 95% of our class is international. So it's a really, really broad mix. 44% of the current class are women, which is great. We haven't reached gender parity yet, but we are certainly striving in the right direction. And in terms of thinking about our average students, if you like, thinking about that sort of distribution curve, that bell curve, the majority of students have 5 years work experience when they think about business school and make their application, though there are always outliers. Some will come to the programme with slightly less and some will come to the programme with more. But broadly speaking, around 5 years work experience seems to be the norm or the average, if you like. And again, thinking about the distribution across the class when it comes to standardised tests, of which more a little later, the median GMAT for the current class is sitting around 690. So again, thinking about the world of the GRE, that would mean scores around 160 or 161 in the verbal and quantitative components. Actually, what I would say while I'm talking through these slides is if questions come to mind while I'm speaking, just type them into the question box and I will get to those at the end of my slide deck. So I'm going to talk to you first and then I will get to answering as many questions as I can in the time that we have together this afternoon, but just type them into the box as they spring to mind. And then I will get to any that I haven't covered in the slides towards the end. So that's what the current cohort looks like. And next year, the cohort is going to look broadly similar. Again, class size, it's likely to be around 320. That's the kind of size class that we are normally looking to craft. And it does usually have a very international flavour. As you probably know from your research already, we operate 4 pools of applications across the year. So people are submitting their applications and then we gather together all of the applications that are complete by a particular date, and those are considered together in an application stage pool, if you like. As I mentioned in the introduction, 10th of January is the stage 3 application deadline. So what that means is we will gather together all of the applications that have become complete between stage 2 and then, and we will consider those applications together head to head on a competitive basis. The January deadline is always our biggest of the year. That's when the rump of candidates tend to apply. Potentially, I think, because a lot of people have just enjoyed a little bit of time off over the Christmas break, and so that gives them some time to put their applications together and get them safely submitted. The January deadline also falls in line with the wider university's application deadline for scholarships. So again, I think that might drive numbers, but suffice to say, January 10th is when we expect to receive the majority of applications for entry to the programme next year. If you are listening, thinking about the future, yes, there is a 4th application stage deadline. That's heading in 3rd of April. I would say that you're very welcome to apply in April. It will be considered in the normal fashion. You will find that the scholarship pool is very diminished by that time. As I've said, that the deadline for scholarship applications across the university does fall in January. So if you have other funding arrangements, then you're very welcome to apply in April. There will still be some scholarships left that we award here at the school, but those awarded by the university more centrally will have gone by then. And it's worth mentioning that these deadlines, they really are that. They are deadlines. In other words, you need to have applied by the deadline and your application needs to be complete. So you need to have provided all of the relevant materials, answered all of the questions, hit submit, your references need to have come in, and you also need to have taken any relevant steps after your application is submitted. And I'll be talking about that in a little more detail on a later slide. But it really is worth hammering home that a deadline is really a deadline. So that's when everything needs to be in place. I know lots of candidates say, oh, but I have this situation, I have that situation. Well, a deadline is a deadline. We publish these every year when we open the application round in August. So those deadlines are out there for you to see and work towards. And we hope that as many people as possible will be able to hit Friday's deadline with a nice, complete application ready for us to consider. So let's get under the skin now of the aspects that make for an MBA application. So this is what we are looking for you to provide as part of your online application. And it's worth mentioning actually that the application is entirely online at this stage. There is no need to send us paper copies of anything right now. If you're applying, all we want is anything that you upload online. There might come a step further along in your admission journey, particularly if your application is successful, where we reach out to you and ask you for other materials. But at this stage, everything we need is in soft copy format, so purely online. Okay, so unsurprisingly, you need to have completed an undergraduate degree in order to apply for postgraduate study at Oxford. We are not particularly bothered what subject you studied at undergraduate level, however. Just because you're applying to read for a Master's in Business Administration does not mean that you need to have read for an undergraduate degree in business or management, or indeed any particularly quant-heavy subject. We welcome a very diverse pool of candidates with respect to their academic background. Whether you studied for a degree in music or history or business or economics or something of that nature, your applications are equally welcome. We do, however, ask that you performed fairly reasonably in your undergraduate degree, broadly in line with a UK upper second class honours. We don't insist that you only apply if you graduated with a first class degree. Your academic history is really, it's just one data point. You are more than just your undergraduate degree, and we fully recognise the fact that it could have been some years ago that you studied for your bachelor's degree, and indeed your professional life might have now taken you in a very different direction. So we are not necessarily looking for stellar academic excellence in your undergraduate degree, but we are looking for performance across your profile. I'll touch upon that in a moment or two. So just thinking about that undergraduate degree, you don't need to calculate the equivalence of your degree classification versus the UK system. So you might want to do a little bit of online research in terms of, okay, I did my degree in this country and I scored this. How does that compare to the UK system? And if you can figure out that it's broadly in line with a UK upper second class degree, great, go ahead and apply. But we don't need you, for example, to have paid out to get a professional equivalence certificate or anything of that nature. And when it comes to completing the application form, you just need to give us your degree classification as it's shown on your transcript. So if you got a B or an alpha minus or a 94% or a 2.2, however it's expressed, that's what you need to tell us on your application. And it's part of our due diligence when we process your application to make that conversion from your educational system across to the UK equivalent. Okay, so don't worry about having to make that calculation for us. We will determine that when we process your application. In terms of the proof of your degree that we require at this stage, all you need to do is upload a scan of either your degree transcript, or if you have access to an online portal from your previous university where you can download an unofficial transcript or mark sheet or something of this nature, then you can upload that. So really what I want to get across is we don't want your degree certificate, we want your transcript. So something quite different. Your transcript shows us not only your overall and eventual grade upon graduation, but it shows us how you performed across the duration of your study. So this is the document that lists every module, every topic, every course that you studied for, and how you performed in each of those. And that level of granularity is really important to the committee because it shows us perhaps the different types of courses that you studied and your performance in each of the subjects. So we may see, for example, that your performance in this subject was weaker, but then your performance in this and this and this was much stronger. Therefore, your overall grade fell into this category. So it helps us build up a much broader picture of your academic history, rather than just, I got a degree and it was first class. So a little more detail. So make sure you can get hold of your transcripts for us, and your unofficial transcripts are absolutely fine at this stage. I know in some countries, particularly in the US, you get your transcripts, it comes in a sealed envelope and it says, do not break the seal, it will be invalid. And you might be worried about opening that envelope in order to scan it and upload it to our online application system. That's fine, open the seal, scan it, upload it. I know that it will say void and the watermark will show. That's absolutely fine. We are really experienced at seeing these documents. It will not bother us one iota. Okay, moving on to the standardized test score. So all of our candidates must take a GMAT or GRE prior to applying for the Oxford MBA. In terms of the scores that we're looking for, in the GMAT, as we've said already, class median is sitting around 690. That doesn't mean that everyone has 690, or it certainly doesn't mean that if you've got 690 or above, you're definitely going to be admitted. Again, a little bit like the undergraduate degree, your GMAT or GRE results is, again, it's just another data point in your overall profile. But to give you a little bit of clarity around this, if we're talking to prospective candidates and they're thinking about taking the test, or maybe they've already taken the test and they're not quite sure about their performance and how we might view it, we tend to say that a score in the GMAT of 650 plus is more competitive. Certainly, if you've sat for the GMAT and you've scored below 600, you definitely should retake before applying. I'd really encourage you to think about that. Some candidates can't, it's purely a matter of time, and you might want to just take a chance, and that's also fine, but your application will potentially be at a disadvantage, thinking about the median score in the class at the moment. The GMAT and GRE are pretty good indicators for us as to how you're likely to cope with course content. So whilst it is only one data point, it is fairly important, does give us a fairly good insight into your rounded capabilities, as it were, quite different to your undergraduate degree. And of course, very importantly, it shows us a little insight into your capability now, whereas your undergraduate degree might be something from 6 years ago, so not necessarily indicative. Whereas a GMAT or GRE that you took within the last couple of years or 6 months absolutely does give us that insight. So there aren't hard and fast rules around definitely don't even think about applying if your score is under X. There is no magic formula, but you do need to ask yourself, does this score really reflect what I feel are my true capabilities? You've maybe taken some practice tests, then you sit the exam for real. Are you happy with your result? Is it okay? Do you think that if you're applying it, you are giving it your best shot? If you do have serious doubts about your test score and you've substantially underperformed against what you were expecting, I would say think about retaking, think about applying at a different point. However, if you are determined to apply right now, or if you have to apply right now for whatever reason, you can apply with pretty much a score that you feel is competitive, and like I say, 650 and above is usually viewed as a little more competitive. For certain careers, it's true to say that the GMAT is held in some high regard by certain employers. And so, you know, for those of you that are maybe seeking a career in those sectors, you could find that a GMAT score of over 700 is going to be pretty much essential to helping you along that pathway. But for the vast majority of candidates, employers are not particularly interested in your GMAT. But for us, again, a nice balanced scorecard and a score that you think puts you in line with the current class. So you're not a wild outlier sitting there with a 400 GMAT thinking that's probably going to be fine. It's probably not going to be fine. Think about retaking. At least when you retake, you can do some really tactical revision. Once you've taken a test, you will know, is it my quantitative section that really let me down? Was it my verbal? Was it my integrated reasoning that really let me down on my scores? Is my scorecard really out of whack? When I revise next time around, maybe I think, okay, I'm not going to even bother thinking about my verbal skills because they're great, but I am going to invest all of my time in my mathematical ability because it's really that component that foxed me. So you can really, I think, get to know yourself by working through the GMAT or GRE. For those of you that have taken the test some time ago, when you submit your application, your test does still need to be valid. So that means it needs to be taken within the last 5 years. That's within the last 5 years of when the class is going to start in September. When you submit your application, we will then log on and verify your official scores, either with Pearson for the GMAT or with ETS for the GRE. And if your scores are older than 5 years, we will be locked out. We simply won't be able to verify your scores. So they need to be current. You need to have taken that test within the last 5 years. And bearing in mind that we're not going to even see your application, let alone process it until well after the application deadline, if it's expiring tomorrow, you are going to have to retake your test in order for us to have access to a valid test score once the application deadline has passed. Just talking about Pearson and ETS, it's worth mentioning here that you, when you take the test, will be asked which institutions you would like to have access to your official scores. Make sure that we are on that list of institutions, and just be aware that we are listed separately from the University of Oxford. So you'll find University of Oxford is listed and University of Oxford Side Business School is listed separately. So make sure you choose the right institution. We do need to verify your scores. Also, just to clarify on this point, for those of you that have taken the test and already listed an institution, the fact that you have put us on that list of universities that you're applying to, it does not mean that you therefore do not need to upload your copy of your score report. You do still need to upload your copy of your score report, or we cannot verify your marks. So that's absolutely critical. Even if you know that official scores are being sent to Oxford or Oxford have been given access to your scores, without you uploading your copy of your score report, your application will remain incomplete. Now, this is something you can only upload once you've submitted your application. So when you hit submit, on the next page on our website that you land upon, you will see there's the opportunity for you to upload your degree transcript and your score report for your GMAT or GRE. That's mandatory. You absolutely need to provide that document to us, okay? A lot of candidates, because they think they have added Oxford to their list, that we somehow will magically find your score report. Well, no, you need to upload it for us, so please pay attention to that. Video assessment, next on the list here. I'm going to skip over that and come back to it on a separate slide in just a moment. And I'm going to move on to talk about English proficiency. Now, for those of you listening who are applying, if your degree, your undergraduate degree, or indeed your master's degree, if you already have a master's, if that was taught entirely in English and examined entirely in English, you will not need to provide an English test result, okay? You will meet the terms for a waiver if your previous degree was taught entirely in English. And of course, providing you can prove that to us. The way that you would prove that to us, you will see in the online application, it asks you a question: have you undertaken full-time degree level study taught entirely in English? If you say yes, you then need to upload either your degree transcript if the transcript has printed on it the medium of instruction is English, or a letter from your university confirming that your degree was taught entirely in English. Obviously, for those of you who were educated in places like Australia or the US or Canada or here in the UK, if you upload your transcript, we know that that was taught entirely in English, so you don't need to get a letter. But for those of you, for example, who were educated maybe in a country like, let's say, Singapore or maybe India, where, yes, your degree was taught entirely in English, you will need to upload your degree transcript, have a good read of it, back and front, to make sure that it says somewhere on there, medium of instruction or language of instruction is entirely in English. And if it does say that on your transcript, upload it for us. If it doesn't, talk to your university. They will send you a standard letter that confirms that your degree was taught entirely in English. It's a really common request. They will just have a template letter. They'll pop it out to you super quickly. It's a really standard document. So you should be able to obtain that from your university, and then you can upload it. For those of you who have not completed a degree that was taught entirely in English, and if you are a national of a country that is not English speaking, now that's not English speaking as determined by you or indeed by us, that's determined by the UK government, so the UK Home Office. So if you are a national of a country that's not majority English speaking, you will need to take an English test before you apply to the Oxford MBA, and the results of that test must meet our requirements. So unlike the GMAT and GRE, where your test score can vary and we will see all these different scores on a distribution curve, for your English test, it's a really binary thing. Your test results either meet Oxford University's requirement or they don't. If they do, great. Submit your application, submit your copy of your English test result. You might have taken, for example, the internet-based TOEFL test or the IELTS test or one of the Cambridge tests of English proficiency. We accept all of those. Give us your copy of your results, upload that to your application, but you absolutely need to have achieved the standards that we require. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail about those because you can read about them on our website. They're expressed in great detail, not only the overall scores that you need to have achieved, but also the component scores that you need to have achieved in, for example, written English, spoken English, your ability to listen, and so on and so forth. But suffice to say, if, for example, in the TOEFL, where we ask for a total score of 110, if you scored 99, that's not good for us. It doesn't meet Oxford University's standard. Therefore, we're not going to be able to admit you to the programme. So you are going to have to retake before you apply to the MBA. Now, whereas with the GMAT and GRE, we have a validity window of 5 years, with language tests, that validity window is only 2 years. So you need to demonstrate that you have taken an English proficiency test and met our requirements within the last 2 years if you are applying. So check the dates on your old IELTS test or whatever it was that you took. Check the date and check your scores against our minimum standards, and you will find those talked about in great detail on our website. And there's also a lot of frequently asked questions online that speak to various concerns and questions that are common when it comes to English tests, English proficiency tests. Okay, so moving on to your professional backstory now, and also your professional vision, if you like. So this is you as a professional looking backwards and indeed looking forwards, and again, an important part of your application. An MBA is not like any other master's degree that you could potentially do straight after your undergraduate degree. It's not like a traditional academic taught master's programme. It's a very vocational experience. Sure, it's an academic degree, but Candidates should come to an MBA at the right time of their professional life, not just the right time of their academic life. And this is really because the kind of teaching that you experience on an MBA it's not just theoretical, it's very practical. It's an opportunity for you to learn as much from the people around you in the room, your classmates, as it is to learn from our faculty. You need to think about an MBA when you are at least 2 years into your professional working life. So that's 2 years after graduating from your undergraduate degree. You've started out in your career, you have shown some progression, you've performed well, and now an MBA is starting to make sense. As I said on the slide earlier, the majority of our class are sitting on about 5 or 6 years experience when they do their MBA application. So about 6 years usually when they start the programme. It really is important that you come with stories to tell. An MBA isn't a chance for us to just tell you the theory of everything that you need to know. It really is a chance for you to draw upon your life experience, think about those theories and put them almost into practice historically, thinking about using that theoretical knowledge to layer upon what you've already acquired just through living life in a professional context, and also taking those theories forward back into the workplace. We ask, therefore, that you apply when you've got at least 2 years full-time work experience that you've gained since graduation. Having said that, we really don't mind where that experience was gained in terms of sector. It's fair to say that the MBA class here at Oxford is not full of people that have worked in finance or full of people that are management consultants, for example. It really is quite a mixed bag, a very diverse community. Sure, we absolutely welcome applications from candidates who work in one of those two sectors, and indeed between them they do make up quite a large chunk of the class. But alongside them we welcome candidates who have worked in everything from military service right through to the creative arts. Maybe your background is in medicine, maybe your background is in government or public policy. Maybe you work in technology, maybe you work in a family firm and are being groomed for leadership. Maybe you run your own business, or maybe you want to start your own business. So everyone has a different backstory in terms of their professional experience and what they bring to the class, but they will all have sufficient professional experience to draw upon. And in terms of looking forward, so thinking about what you want to do after you've completed your MBA, a section of the online application leads you through a fairly reflective exercise where it asks you to think about your own career development and your own vision. What will it look like when you graduate from the MBA? Where do you see yourself? Are you going to be seeking employment? Are you starting your own business? You'll see that you can either answer to this question, yes, my trajectory is very much going to be employment, or it might be going back to a family business, or it might be I'm going down the route of entrepreneurship. But no matter which option you choose, we will then unfold a series of questions that we ask you to speak to in some detail that help us build a picture of where you've come from, where you want to go to. And I'm not just talking geographically here, I'm talking about the type of role, I'm talking about perhaps your ideal employers, the sector that either you work in already or the sector that maybe you're looking to pivot into, and build us a really strong narrative around the kind of role that you want, why you feel you're a great fit for that kind of role. And here, for example, you can talk to us about the extensive network that you have of people who perhaps work in this field already and the wisdom that they have shared with you. or it could be you have your eye on a few potential employers and you can demonstrate to us that you have a deep understanding of the hiring practices of those particular firms, and you can try and convince us that you think you would be a good hiring prospect for employers like that, for that type of role. And you can really start to, I guess, build a picture that tells us a story about your career vision that makes sense. Sure, you're probably looking to make some changes. That's why you're going to be doing an MBA, but at least convince us that whilst it might be challenging, it's achievable, it's realistic, and that you really have your eyes wide open about the kind of future that you are working towards. You're aware of perhaps the challenges that might be in your path or the hurdles that might present themselves to you, but you are equipped and ready and aware to overcome those. You really have your eyes on a goal that is achievable and it's realistic. And you can also articulate for us how the MBA really fits in with that vision. And like any good plan, you need to have a plan B. So therefore, in the career development section of your online application, you will see a question that really says to you, okay, so you've told us what you really would like to be doing in the future, but just in case that doesn't work out, then what? What's your plan? So as I've said, quite a detailed reflective exercise that just helps you really, I suppose, understand yourself, where you're at in your professional life and where you want to go, and how the MBA really fits with that. It is a very important part of your application, and the committee really want to understand that narrative and see that that really hangs together in a coherent and persuasive way. So the next stop on this slide is references. Now, you need to have 2 referees to speak on your behalf to support your application. We really don't mind whether these are academic or professional. I would suggest if you have been out of academia for some time, then 2 professional references will probably make more sense, unless you are still in touch with academics from your previous degree and maybe they're still your mentor. But broadly speaking, your referees need to tell us what your strengths and weaknesses are, what makes you tick, why you are suited to an MBA, why you are suited to an MBA here at Oxford. Perhaps they can give us some really great examples of your work from the workplace. These might be people that you report to in a professional context. It might be someone who is a peer to you in a professional context. It might even be a client or someone who you've worked closely with to deliver some project deliverables over a number of months or years. In other words, these are people that know you in a professional context and they know you well. They don't just have your passing acquaintance. So they can really help to support your application. On the online application form, I would suggest as soon as you start your application, you register your referees straight away. And that means that they can be working on their letters of recommendation and getting those submitted in tandem or in parallel, if you like, with you completing the rest of your application form. And don't forget, referees are often very busy people. Make sure that your referees are primed and ready. Make sure that they know that they're going to be getting an email from Oxford, that you are applying to do an MBA here, so warm them up to that. And then when they get an email from us in their inbox, they will know to give it their swift attention, and also let them know when the deadline is. We will not be chasing your referees for you. That is your job. Your references need to be in by the application deadline. So make sure your referees know the deadline that you are aiming towards. Okay, supporting statement. This is a short essay. It's just 250 words, that's all, so really brief. And it asks you one question. What else would you like the admissions committee to know about you that isn't covered elsewhere in your application? So a really open question, and you can interpret this in whichever way suits you. You can use that as an opportunity to tell us a little bit more about you and what you like to do when you're not at work, for example. your CV will have listed your previous experience and your academics for us, but there might be something about you that you do away from work that you think is super cool and super interesting, and maybe it has some real relevance, in which case, tell us about it. You might feel that there's something in your backstory that maybe lets you down a little bit. Maybe when you were doing your undergraduate degree, you spent too much time rowing and not enough time studying, so your grades suffered, maybe in a particular year or something like that, in which case, maybe you'll decide to tell us about that. It shows great self-awareness. However you decide to interpret that question, I would say certainly answer it. Tell us something. Make us want to know more about you. Give us a little bit more information that isn't provided elsewhere. Help us understand what makes you tick. Right, the video assessment. And again, this is something that you can only access once you've submitted your application. So you submit your application, having answered all of the questions in the application form, you hit submit, and then you upload your transcript, you upload your GRE or GMAT score report, and the third thing you do is you complete your video assessment. You'll see a link, you click on that link, it takes you to our online platform. Once you're on the platform, you have lots and lots of opportunity to play with the platform, get to know it, get used to seeing yourself on screen, get used to hearing yourself on screen. We will ask you a bunch of practice questions that you can do over and over and over again, just to get used to, like I say, hearing and seeing yourself. So you can do that as often as you wish, but there comes a point where you will then need to take the plunge and answer your genuine video assessment questions. And you need to have completed this exercise by the time the deadline falls. So at some point, if you are targeting this Friday, for example, at some point between now and Friday, you are going to need to take the plunge. And when you're ready and you've finished your practices, you will hit your real questions. You will then be asked 5 questions. The first 4 questions will be in video format. That means you will see one of us, one of the team members here. In fact, you'll see me. I certainly ask some of those questions. And the questions will be things like, without giving too much away, why do you want to do an MBA at Oxford? Okay, nothing surprising there. You should be able to predict a question like that. Some of the other questions that you might be asked, it might be something very sort of situational or hypothetical. For example, a member of your team comes to you with a problem. What do you do to help them, and why do you choose that course of action? So a lot of these questions are quite hypothetical and situation based. They're really showing us how you think on your feet, as well as your communication skills. They mimic an interview to a degree. You are answering against the clock, but unlike in an interview, you do have a couple of minutes to gather yourself, first of all. So you will see the question, you will see one of the team read the question to you. You then have a couple of minutes to think about an answer, then you commit that answer against the clock via video. And as I've said, 4 questions will take that format. The 5th question is a short written question. Again, a question will pop up on screen and you are then typing against the clock. And again, it just shows us how you think and type on your feet. So a little bit of fluidity in your written English there, under a little bit of time pressure. Again, this is just one part of the application, and this has not done away with interviews. This is very much part of the application process. We do still shortlist candidates for interview, and interview is a completely different process further along in the admissions journey. But this just really gets us to meet the person behind the application, if you like. Make sure you do your videos by the deadline. And do practice before you do your live takes. Those would be my top tips. It's a very robust online system. It works globally, easily. You just need your laptop with a working webcam and a mic. Everything that's normally built into a laptop will see you fine, and it's very robust on a Wi-Fi connection. So you should be okay with that, but don't overlook it. Okay, so thinking now about how you can strengthen your application. We are, as we work through your application and when we come to meet in committee and are reading through your application and watching your videos, we're really looking to see some of these competencies displayed. We are looking to see a candidate that really demonstrates awareness. Now, that could be self-awareness. So that might be, for example, understanding that perhaps there's something about your profile that is a little weaker than you would like, and you can tell us about that in your essay. Or you might be demonstrating great awareness in your career development section by articulating to us your knowledge about a particular sector that you're looking to transition into, for example. So we're looking for candidates who are aware and awake and are plugged into what's going on in the here and now, but also introspective, know themselves well. We are looking for leadership. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to have managed a large team in the past. We are equally interested in leadership potential. So think to yourself, how in my application can I either demonstrate the leadership that I have, and that might be, for example, in the way that you speak to your video assignments, or it might be in your career development section, or it might be in your supporting statement. Perhaps you can tell us either about leadership in the pure sense of the word, leadership skills that you know you already possess, or it could be thinking about your leadership potential. Maybe it's something you do even outside of work that you think really demonstrates your leadership potential far more than anything you've ever been paid to do in a work context. That might make for interesting reading in your supporting statement. Of course, we want to see your communication skills. We want to see fluidity and a lucid explanation of, for example, your career plan. Equally, we want to meet someone on film, so in your video assessment, that has some presence and some charisma, good, fluid communication skills. Someone who we then think, oh, we really would like to meet this person at interview. I'd like to speak to this person again. I'd like to know a little bit more about them. So think about how you can put an application together that really showcases your communication skills in the round. And equally here, teamwork is important. When you come to the MBA, you are not going to be sat and taught in isolation. You are going to be very much part of a cohort. It's a very collaborative experience, whether it comes to networking with potential employers or whether it just comes down to the way that you engage with some of your teammates in perhaps a challenge as part of the curriculum and how well you work with other people. Think in your application about how you can demonstrate that propensity for teamwork and your ability to get on with other people and to appreciate other people's input and ideas as well as your own. So again, that might come out through your video assessments, or it might come out through your supporting statement, or indeed through your career development section. And thinking again of career development here, career vision. I'll come back to this again here on this slide, because the MBA as a program, it really can literally take you places. It is a transformational experience for students. Some are looking to accelerate in their career and others are looking to really make quite a shift in their professional career after coming to Oxford for a year. But your vision needs to hang together. It needs to be well articulated. It needs to be grounded in reality. This is a one-year program, so it's going to be an intense experience from an academic perspective, as well as you needing to work hard at getting yourself the job that you want when you graduate from this school. So come back to that career vision section a number of times, I would recommend, while you are preparing your application, and make sure that that really is coherent and articulate, and it really does make good sense. So some next steps, if you haven't already and you are thinking about applying in the future, think about that GMAT and GRE. Start to prepare for that test. We've got a great simulator that you can access through our website. So if you want to sign up for that, please jump online and start those simulations now. That would certainly prepare you very well for applying in the future. For those of you who are hitting this Friday's deadline too late, you will have already done your GMAT or GRE. But for those of you where it's more of a future ambition, think about starting to prepare for that test right now. Start your application in good time. So if you are, for example, thinking about a stage 4 application rather than 3, there's nothing to stop you starting your application way before the deadline. You might want to start it now. Register your referees so they can be starting to work on their letters of recommendation while you gather together the rest of your application. Right, I am conscious that we don't have a great amount of time left together this afternoon. So what I will do here is show you our email address so that you can pop emails off to us if there's something that you would like to ask, perhaps offline, maybe something pertaining to your personal situation that you would like to ask about. You're more than welcome to drop us an email anytime, and the team will be delighted to answer those questions. But for those of you that have been busily typing questions into the question box, I'm going to now get through as many as I can of those questions where I haven't already answered the question on the slides. So for example, here there's someone giving me some personal details about themselves, saying they've got 12+ years of experience and they've worked in blah, blah, blah background. Am I eligible? That's exactly the kind of question that you should be emailing us about. That's really a personal conversation that we would need to have with you rather than speaking in a general fashion right now. Someone here says, I have 305 in the GRE. Is it fine to apply? Well, my answer there would be there is no total score in the GRE, so I'm not quite sure what you mean by 305. Perhaps you have added together your quantitative and verbal score. In the GRE, it's very important that you don't think about this as a total score. You need to think about your component scores. You need to, I would say realistically, achieve around 160 or perhaps 161 in both the verbal and the quantitative components in order to be fairly competitive when it comes to that particular standardized test. Someone here saying if they take the GMAT shortly before the deadline and they just therefore have access to their unofficial score rather than their official score, can they still be considered? Right, this is a really good question. On the day that you take your GMAT, you will get access to your unofficial results. You will get what they call a test taker's copy of your unofficial GMAT results. You need that document in order to apply. That's fine. You can apply with it. Make sure you get hold of it as a PDF and you upload it to your online application once you've submitted your application. Providing you have listed us as an institution that you're applying to, we will then, when we process your application, we will liaise directly with Pearson or ETS in order to see your official score, which is usually released sometime after you've taken the test. So for the GMAT, you get your score report there and then on the day. For the GRE, you do not get your score there and then on the day in any sort of document form. It's usually some days later. Therefore, if you're taking a GRE, you need to take it well before the deadline, because you do need to upload your unofficial test score report and you don't get it on the test day. Question here, what kind of supplementary material do we ask for after submitting an online application? Okay, so once you submit your online application, you upload your transcript, you upload your GMAT or GRE score reports, and you undertake your video assessment. That is literally all you need to do. If we then assess your application and let's say it moves forward to the next stage, which is being called for interview, at that stage and only at that point will we reach out to you and ask for your official transcripts. So we don't want anything from you unless we ask for it. Okay, what have we got here? Okay, so some candidates here have got quite similar questions around the GMAT or GRE. So they have taken the test already, so it's fine. They're applying and they're going to meet Friday's deadline, but they've got another test booked shortly after the deadline. That's fine. You will have applied, so we will have a test score that we can work with. If you want us to take that new test score into consideration, we absolutely need to have your new test scores while we are making our deliberations about whether to shortlist you for interview. Okay, otherwise the only test score that we've got to go on is the one that you've given us as part of your application. So if you can get new test scores to us by, let's say, the 20th of January, we are going to be able to take that into consideration, but only if your application was complete at the deadline. So just to recap, in case there's any confusion, I'm only talking now to candidates who have already taken a GMAT or GRE, therefore their application will be complete at the deadline, but they have another test already scheduled between the deadline and the 20th of January. We will accept your new test scores, but you must get it to us by the 20th of January. Anything later than that, the committee will not see it in time before making their decision about whether to shortlist you for interview or not. Right, what have we got here? Anything else that's relevant to everybody listening? Good question here about the career development section. Now, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, when it comes to the supporting statement, there is a word count for that. It's 250 words. For the career development section of the application form, there is no words count. So you can be quite detailed. What I would say is, use your own intelligence and judgment around giving us sufficient information to really understand the goal that you have set yourself professionally after graduating from the MBA versus War and Peace. The admissions committee will be thoroughly reading every application. Every application is read at least twice by two different members of the admissions committee when we are deciding who we want to shortlist for interview. So we need to allow enough time to read all of those applications thoroughly. Use your own judgment between saying too little and saying far too much. So be quite detailed in the career development section of the form, but we are not literally looking for a step-by-step business plan. Video interviewing. Okay, so thinking here that you are probably asking about the video assessment, so something that formed part of the application. The person here is asking about dress code. I would say, yes, this does not replace an interview. So you are not being interviewed, if you like, for the MBA place, but treat it as if you were. In other words, be sensible. Think about how you are coming across on camera. This is your chance to make a first impression visually to the admissions committee. So therefore, yes, business attire. Look sharp, look engaged, look awake. We do not want to see you uploading your video assessments in your pajamas or from your bed. We want to see someone that looks awake and engaged and switched on and keen and cheerful and enthused to be applying to the Oxford MBA. Good question here about CVs. For those of you that have started your applications already, you will know, or indeed read our website, you'll know that we ask you to upload a CV. That needs to be just 1 page long. Okay, so you need to distill your academic and professional experience down to just 1 page. If you are having difficulty in doing that, you will find a template for doing so, both on our website and also on the online application system. You're not obliged to use that template. Absolutely up to you whether you use it or not, but it just gives you an idea of how you might want to set out your CV. In other words, we don't want to see amazing graphics and crazy fonts. We don't want to see photographs. It uses up too much space. We're asking you to distill all of your CV information to just one side. So therefore, your degree or degrees, your professional experience, not too much detail, and a little bit about your interests away from work, not too much detail again. So everything needs to fit onto 1 page. So use that template if you find it helpful, but you don't have to. Just see if there are any last questions. I'm conscious that our time together is almost up, so I'm going to take 1 more question. I'm going to have a quick scroll through to see if there's anything that I think is relevant to all who will be listening, rather than personal questions that are far better submitted via email for one of the team to give some one-on-one counselling to. Okay, just one last question here about funding one's MBA. There is a section on the online application that does ask about funding. Now here, you can tell us whether you intend on funding your MBA through personal savings, or whether you might be taking out a student loan, or family funding, whatever it might be. This has no relevance to your application at all. We don't take this into account. So we're not, for example, more likely to offer you admission if you say that you can pay the course fee out of your personal savings. So that has no relevance. We are not going to hold you to that source of funding at all. It's purely indicative. It's just data that is collated by the wider university. It has no relevance. What does have relevance is for those of you who wish to be considered for scholarships, and I'm sure that's going to be pretty much everybody, because if you are awarded a scholarship, even if you can afford the course fee, that is a bonus, right? You will probably be aware from the research that you've already done that the vast majority of scholarships here at Oxford are awarded without you needing to do anything other than apply and be admitted to the MBA. In other words, you don't have to upload lots and lots and lots of extra essays, or you don't have to take part in lots of separate interviews for funding purposes. So the vast majority of scholarships that we award here at the school, and scholarships that are awarded by the university more centrally, you don't need to do anything else other than apply. However, there are a small handful of scholarships that do require you to upload additional essays. When you get to that section of the online application form, there is more information provided about that small handful of scholarships. So I think there's literally, from memory, maybe 3 or 4 out of all of the scholarships that we award that do ask for you to jump through a couple of extra hoops. And that's, for example, writing an additional essay. So head to the funding section of the form, tell us how you think you're going to be funding your MBA, but that has no bearing on your likelihood of admission. If it comes to scholarships, look at the scholarships that do ask for extra paperwork to be uploaded. See if that's a scholarship that you want to be considered for. Check out the eligibility criteria. And if it is one of the scholarships that you are really keen to enter the competition for, make sure you upload that additional essay as part of your application. Right, okay, so many apologies. I know that I haven't got through to all of the questions that were being asked. I've got through as many as I can that I felt had a really sort of broad appeal to all of the listeners. For those of you that have submitted emails that are of a more personal nature, as it were, I would encourage you to drop an email to the address that you can see on the screen right now and let one of my colleagues help you on a one-to-one basis with some guidance. But all it really remains for me to say is good luck with your applications, whether you are targeting this Friday's deadline or whether you are targeting the stage 4 application deadline, or whether you are really at the very early stages of your MBA journey and you are thinking about being in the stage 1 pool next year. Either way, whatever your story, I wish you the very best of luck with your application, and I hope that our paths cross again. Thanks very much indeed for listening to me this afternoon, and goodbye from Oxford.